Alrighty, and we are recording. Welcome back to the Reserves Podcast, the very best podcast recording from the very end of the bench. My name's Emiliano.
Colin here.
Alrighty, and Colin, we have got a ton of stuff to touch on today. So let's just jump right in to the Reserves recap. And starting this recap, we have that Game 7, Clippers Nuggets. Every Game 7 is exciting. But this one was exciting for a different reason. I mean, you go through the whole game and, Nuggets really had it in the bag pretty much like the whole second half of the game. You kind of had this feeling that the Nuggets were just going to win. What are your thoughts just stepping away, right away? What were your thoughts? Clippers getting eliminated.
I mean, right away. I don't want to say it again, but Emiliano and myself are proven to be psychics, I guess. At the end of the last episode, we said we'll be giving you guys an update about how the Nuggets eliminated the Clippers, and here we are. Such a beautiful thing is basketball. The Nuggets facing multiple elimination games in a row against the deepest basketball team in the NBA. Championship favorites, two superstars, perimeter defense stacked, bench stacked, and they fumble it.
Yep.
There is no excuse how you lose this series. There's no excuse how Doc Rivers doesn't have some type of matchup change. There's no excuse how you let Jamal Murray score 40 points in an elimination game. You let Lou Williams guard him on a multitude of possessions. There's just no excuse from a team full of veterans top to bottom and a championship caliber coach as well. You just can't lose these games. You can't.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that I feel like it would be easy to say, that the Nuggets really caught everybody off guard and that this really was an upset. And I don't think that, as far as like skill gap goes, I don't think that this was as big of an upset as people think. I think that honestly, we've all kind of been tricked by, and you called it out last week, Colin, our last episode. I think we've all kind of been tricked by the Clippers, just like simply their attitude towards like their own abilities and their own skill level. Like the Clippers have been pretending as if they're defending champs or they're this huge dynasty that's been around the NBA for a long time. And like Skip Bayless called it out on a tweet that he had right after the game. Like, nope, they're just the same old Clippers going right back down to the basement of the Staples Center. And like, unfortunately, that's just kind of what they ended up being, and like, I feel like there was even a comment by Montrezl Harrell after the game of like we didn't think that we were this like fantastic championship team. Like we're the same exact team as we were last year. We just added two big guys. And like it ended up kind of being true. Like that's kind of exactly what I thought ended up happening. Like they were relying on the same exact guys from last year, to like take them over the edge, but they just added Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, two superstars who unfortunately just didn't show up in Game 7.
It was truly like a David versus Goliath situation, or like the tortoise and the hare, where one person was viewed by everyone as like the favorite, and the other person was viewed by everyone as like, no threat, essentially. Not that the Nuggets shouldn't be taken seriously, and I think people are realizing that now, but it's just one of those things that the Clippers were the Clippers. The media built them up, the players built them up. Like everyone had this viewpoint on them as like it's a lock. Like they're at least going to the conference finals.
Yep.
And I mean, the Nuggets are here, man. Like you can't call them a young team. You can't call them, a future dynasty. Like they're here. They're in the conference finals. Like LeBron is going to be taking on the Nuggets, not the Clippers.
Yep. No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I mean, unfortunately, there's not as much to talk about, in terms of like, storylines and everything like that. Like, the storyline kind of continues for the Nuggets, and there's not even speculation into what the Clippers are going to do this summer. Like the questions that we have here probably are, like what happens with Doc Rivers? He has the most Game 7 losses of any coach. No other coach has more than 4, and Doc
He has
Rivers
multiple 3-1 losses.
Yes.
Teams coming back from 3-1 on him.
So what do the Clippers do with that? Do you continue on with Doc? just for the simple purpose of that he's Doc Rivers, or do you try to move on? To oh my God, can you imagine a Mike D'Antoni on the Clippers? um, but I mean, like, there's question marks. What happens with Paul George? Do the Clippers really, does Steve Ballmer really trust that Paul George will show up for them next playoffs when playoff P hasn't been around since he was in a Pacers jersey, in my opinion. Like, playoff P is just simply no more. Like, he just might not be that guy anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, what do you think? Like, what could you see as being like a big move for the Clippers that might kind of take them over the edge for next year? I don't want to get too much into our like offseason previews individual teams, but right
hmm
off the bat, like you're the GM of the Clippers. What are your immediate thoughts the next morning? After this Game 7 loss.
Yeah. Oh, a couple things is the Clippers basically handshake agreement said that they're bringing Doc Rivers back as a coach next year, and this was just yesterday.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is when you have that many talents and that many basketball heads on one team, like I do agree with Paul George in a sense of like I don't necessarily think that one season was enough to bring like all of those talents together and give them a sure shot. I
Yeah.
think it was more of a product of the media building up.
Mhm.
And I don't think that they make any, real crazy changes this offseason, besides maybe a couple, glue players in and out here and there. But I think they just run it back next year, and that's what I would do as a GM. And yeah, I mean, there's some players on that team that are getting a little older. Lou Williams is in his 30s now, and it's going to be interesting to see what decisions they make. But if I'm the GM, I run it back next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. If I'm the GM, I just can't do that. Like, I would feel really at risk of losing my job if I okay, sorry. I would feel more at risk in losing my job if we run it back and don't succeed again than if I make significant changes and then we don't succeed. I would feel way more at risk if I tell, Steve Ballmer, like, hey, you know what, like, let's just give it another shot. And he says, okay, I trust you. And then nothing happens again, rather than, hey, let me make a few changes and then we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah,
But I mean, I can see why it makes sense on paper to just run it back simply because, like on paper they're just so good. Like it doesn't make sense that they lost when they did against the team that they did. So I can see both sides and why running it back might be a fine option.
yeah. I can't believe that at the beginning of the season there was a debate, from people on Twitter and people in the media that Kawhi Leonard is better than LeBron James. LeBron James has never choked in any other stage besides that one instance against the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals. Like
Yep.
he's always gotten his team there, like
Yep.
all the way to the top. Like you can say like, oh, he lost against the Magic, whatever, but he himself like did everything he could to get his team there.
Yeah.
And Kawhi Leonard with I think it was like 4 or 6 points in the fourth quarter, like I'm sorry, as like the star player and LeBron James competition as one of the top three people in the NBA, you got to show up there. You got to at least try to get to the foul line more than 2 times.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, we're probably not going to talk about the Clippers again unless something comes up in the news. Until our previews for next season. But what a way to end their season after so much hope and anticipation. And for Clippers fans, like, not only are no longer in the playoffs, but you have to watch the Lakers now go up against the team that beat you. And if the Lakers go on to sweep the Nuggets, I don't want to get too much into our prediction because I don't think that's what's going to happen. But if the Lakers go on to sweep the Nuggets, that's going to look really, really bad for the Clippers. So that's all I got to say on that. I don't know. I don't know what you do if you're the Clippers or Clippers fans if the Lakers go on to sweep the Nuggets.
Yeah, I mean, Damian Lillard got the last laugh, man. The
Yep.
whole Clippers team was trolling him, saying, have fun in Cancun. Like your team got bounced. Well, look where they are now.
Yep. All in the same place now. Alrighty, but moving on from Clippers Nuggets, what already is proving to be potentially the best series in all of the playoffs, potentially including the finals. This Heat Celtics series is going to be fantastic. It is going to be jam packed full of fantastic basketball, like we saw the other night. Uh, What are you thinking in terms of like were you expecting this kind of game one from these two teams? I personally was expecting a little bit more of a blowout from the Celtics. I really expected the Celtics to like kind of see what the Heat have done so far in terms of really showing up for game ones, and I really wanted the Celtics to just hit the ground running, and finish off the game with like a double digit win. So what are your thoughts?
Um, I think this game was exactly what I was expecting. I figured game one would be one of those situations where both teams are kind of trading blows, testing each other out, seeing what, each other are going to be like. And both stars showed up, man. Jimmy Butler out there hitting buckets, Jason Tatum out there hitting crazy step back threes from 28, 30 feet away. Like from start to finish, like it was pretty crazy. The Celtics blew a couple double digit leads. There was one like notably like halfway through the fourth where I was like, okay, the Heat are done. And then
Yeah.
Tyler Hero comes out of nowhere and hits a couple huge shots. Like both of these teams are pretty loaded, and I think it's setting itself up to be a really good series.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, both of these teams are set up to do this exact battle year in and year out for like the next 4 or 5 years. Like the way the contracts are set up, the way the players, are just they have so much young talent, and the way their superstars are organized as far as the salary cap goes. Like I really think that these two teams are merging as like the top two teams in the East. You know, uh, uh, Unfortunately, have to exclude the Bucks just because of what they've done, but we could very well be seeing these Eastern Conference Finals year in and year out. But you talked about Jason Tatum, 30 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists. Um, and Tyler Hero from the Heat, yeah, he had really, really impactful 12 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists, almost a triple double. But like something I noticed about the Heat, and I want to know if you notice this too, is like looking over the stats, nobody like blows you away in this huge win. Nobody blows you away on the stat sheet. And like that, I feel like speaks volumes to like what the Heat have been able to do in terms of like just creating this like perfect system with all their players that everybody just contributes to getting the win. Like even Jimmy Butler, like didn't have a crazy stat line, but he was in the right position, when the game mattered most. An incredible game-winning shot, and then defensively, like they just all contribute. I have yet to see this, over the last few years. I feel like it's just been super team after super team, and it's kind of nice to see this sort of team, potentially on its way to the finals.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler's game has never really been dynamic scorer, gets you 30 a game. Like he gets you buckets like when it matters. Like
Hmm.
this Heat team is built for Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, so on and so forth, hitting shots throughout the game and put the ball in Jimmy Butler's hands, put the ball in Dragic's hands with a high screen at the top of the key and let him go to work. Like players get the buckets when it matters the most, but there's not really a person on that team that gets you 30 night in and night out. Like
Yeah.
Dragic can get you 30, Butler can get you 40, but like don't expect that every single game.
Yeah. No, agreed. Agreed.
I'm super interested to see how Tyler Hero's career goes because, first year player, rookie player, mid lottery pick, like he's I think outperformed everyone's expectations. Like he was just kind of seen as almost like a Duncan Robinson, like spot up shooter. Like he can score super raw, but him and Michael Porter, man, I'm super interested to see what happens with their careers going forward.
Yeah. No, definitely. And even like when you were talking about that, I'm trying to think of a comparison. You know, it. I think I think he's already kind of on his way to like that. You know, like if tier one, is like all NBA players, he's going to be that player. I feel like on a regular basis, that's just like right outside of an all NBA selection, or like
Yeah, fringe
right
star.
outside of a few, yeah, like right outside of a few all star picks that like if we had one more big game, maybe he might have been able to make it. But man, no, Michael Porter Jr. is a different conversation. That guy, if he could stay healthy, he's on his way to like a ridiculous career, and definitely. But we can't finish talking about the Heat without talking about what very well might, compete with LeBron's chase down block. Um, that Bam Adebayo block on Jason Tatum, and Jason Tatum was just like ready to win that game for the Celtics. Uh, just absolutely ridiculous. I've personally never watched anything like that live, like to have that sort of block in that moment. But what are your thoughts? Best block ever in the playoffs, or regular season, or anything, or is LeBron's block still number one for you?
Um, I mean, LeBron's block came game 7 in the last 2 minutes of a 3-1 comeback. Like, there's not a stage bigger than that. If he doesn't make that block, both teams were scoreless for multiple minutes straight. Like, if he doesn't make that block, like that leads to a Warriors run. So, stage alone, LeBron's I think is more meaningful and impactful, but Bam Adebayo's is a close second. Like
Yeah.
closing seconds, conference finals, Jason Tatum, wide open to the lane. Like if he lays that ball up, maybe it goes in if he floats it in over his hand, but like he decides like I'm sending this game to overtime. It goes to hammer it down, and like I don't think anyone was expecting Adebayo to send that shot back. Like
No.
if you look at the replay, his wrist is like bent all the way back. Like
Yeah.
that it was nuts. It was crazier watching the replay of it than it happening, in real time. Like I
Yeah.
was
Well,
I was watching it, sorry, I was watching it with my girlfriend next to me, and I was so excited that I jumped up and I looked at her and she was just emotionless. And I was just like, oh my God. Just the
but no,
setting was super funny.
in real time, it looks like, it looks like a great block, of course. And then, in the moment, it's just ridiculous to see a block like that. But yeah, no, you're definitely right that like the slow mo and the replays like did it way more justice of like just how hard that block was because like man, Jason Tatum was trying to bring the rim down. Like he wanted to cement himself as a pivotal piece of the Celtics legacy moving forward with that dunk. But Bam just wasn't having it. But like that sequence right there is like what got me so excited about this series. So, like any game that goes that close, any game that goes to overtime is exciting, of course. But that sequence right there, I was like, okay, this is about to be 7 games of just haymakers back and forth. So yeah, no, it's exciting, definitely.
Yeah. It's very rare that you see a block that has more force than the dunk coming down. Like LeBron had one on Thiago Splitter when he was on the Heat against the Spurs in the finals, where like, Splitter was coming down for the hammer and LeBron's arm was just stronger, man. He just freaking sent it back. Like those blocks are always like the most satisfying.
Yep. But so we have a game saving block, but we haven't really touched on too much. We mentioned it, but haven't touched on it. That game winning shot by Jimmy Butler, like where does that rank in your, like difficulty spectrum? Like he like maneuvered his body like 2 or 3 different ways while he was in the air. Jason Tatum was playing fantastic defense. Like I see that it was a foul in like the new era NBA. I know why it was a foul, but I mean, that was just a ridiculous, like half second of him like floating in midair.
Jason Tatum has a 6'11" wingspan. He's, I think, like 6'9". Went essentially straight up. Like his arms did come forward. That's where the foul occurred. But Jimmy Butler, man, he like triple clutched it in midair. His foot was like about to hit the ground, and he just, tapped it up lightly over his hands, and it just went in perfectly. Like I feel like even Jimmy Butler didn't think that that was going in. Like
No, it's
that
kind of
was
like
crazy.
I mean, like the player that I feel like those kind of shots came from the most was like Dwayne Wade. Like Dwayne Wade had some of those where like at the very last second he just tossed it up towards the rim in hopes that it went in. But like and yeah, like I mean, and I'm just comparing it to that because like yeah, Jimmy just tossed that up in hopes that like one, of course, he wants that shooting foul, so he wants to see the ball like leave his hands. But then yeah, just like oh, let's see if this goes in, and then it went in. But I mean, like for it to happen to him, like there's also that thing of like it's also Jimmy Butler, so maybe he's just crazy, and he was like, no, this is going in.
Yeah, like I said, like he gives you the meaningful buckets. Like he's not going to come down the court and, give you 20 in the fourth quarter, but like you need a bucket, like he's going to do you everything in his power to get that bucket. And he did it, man. And it might not be the most aesthetically pleasing thing. It wasn't a step back three over 7-footer at the buzzer, straight swish, but it was impressive, man. If you like basketball, like that was an impressive shot.
No, see, and I mean, I kind of prefer shots like that. Like I feel like Bogdanovich had one. Bogdanovich had one a couple
Over
years ago
Draymond.
over Draymond, and like those kinds of shots are way more exciting to me than like like granted, like the Lillard shot, like right over Paul George. Like the only reason those aren't as exciting to me is like you kind of just know what's coming. Like you know that he's just gonna hold on to the ball, he's gonna dribble till there's a few seconds left, and then he's gonna step one way or the other, and he's gonna pull up a three. And if it goes in, super exciting. If it doesn't, big letdown. But like
Yeah.
those shots where like you drive to the rim and you're just trying to get like a hard earned bucket are way more exciting to me than the step back three.
I will say that there is not a more anxiety-ridden moment than when the ball is in midair from a three with
Hmm.
seconds on the clock on either side of it. If you're a fan of the team shooting or the defending team, because like you don't know what's about to happen. Like as a fan, like you just automatically assume that ball's going to go in.
Yeah,
That has to be. That's why I mentioned like the most aesthetically pleasing because it's like oh like triple zeros on the clock, like step back three for the win. Like on paper, like that's what people look for in a game-winning shot. But as you said, like more impressive and definitely, kudos to him.
yeah, no, absolutely. Anything else on this Heat Celtics? I feel like this is going to be our biggest talking point moving forward. But after this game one, who you got?
Um, I think I have the Celtics. They just have the depth. If Hayward can make his way back this series, even provide them like 12 to 14 points off the bench, I'm assuming he doesn't jump straight into the starting role. But yeah, that's the part people overlook. Like if Hayward can come back by the third or fourth game and the Celtics maybe steal a game or two, like it's their series.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I think the Heat are just going to start running out of gas a little bit, and I think the Celtics are just primed to finally get to a championship with this squad. So I'm hoping for the Celtics to move on because I think nothing would be better than a Lakers Celtics finals after all of this bubble madness. But honestly, we just can't count the Heat out. Like they've proved us time and time again that there's just no reason to count them out. So although I do think the Celtics are pulling out, I also think it's going 7 games, and in this game seven, anything can happen. So.
Yeah, fair enough.
Moving on to our last reserves recap Lakers Nuggets. This isn't necessarily a recap of games. First game is happening by the time this podcast airs. First game will have happened. Um, but just kind of wanted to get our prediction out there and some kind of matchups and really see like is there a chance for the Nuggets? So question number one, most important question, Colin, is there a world in which the Nuggets beat the Lakers?
Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying in the Clippers Nuggets recap. Uh, At some point, we have to stop seeing the Nuggets as a young upcoming team. That
Hmm.
series solidified themselves as a contender. Like if they can beat the Clippers in 7 games, facing elimination game after elimination game, like you have to consider Michael Malone a top tier coach. You have to consider Jamal Murray and Jokic as a top tandem in the league, and Michael Porter Jr. stepping up as that kind of 6 man scoring off the bench. Like, there's certainly a real chance, and the LeBron James fan in me wants to be like, oh, the Lakers will sweep them, but that the Nuggets are here and they have more than a chance to win this series.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't disagree with you. Very similar as to why I will not count the Heat out of that Heat Celtics series. I refuse to believe that LeBron will get this close after all this bubble stuff that has happened and not push his team over the edge. And if if the Lakers win, it's only going to be a 5 game series. If the Lakers win, I really do think that it'll be a gentleman's sweep. For the Nuggets to win, they have to take it 7 games because I don't see them, I don't see them winning more games than the Lakers at all during this series. Which there's my prediction for game one. I think the Lakers win. So if the Nuggets want to have a chance, it's going to be another come from behind situation.
Yeah, the Nuggets are facing essentially the same situation that they were coming out of that Jazz series, like coming off of this long, grueling, 40-minute performances by the Stars, 7 game series, compared to a team that came off of it was like a 5 game series against the Rockets.
Yep.
Like the Lakers had a couple days off, they're rested. The Nuggets are going to be coming into this like a little tired. And I could see the Lakers running away with this first game, about 10, 15 point victory. But I think in the long grand scheme of things, it's the Nuggets. The Nuggets have a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, I mean, it's the conference finals, so like, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's 7 game series for a reason. And I know that I've said it multiple times, but I really do think the NBA is the best sport in terms of the best team really does win. And, if we dive really deep into the Lakers, we might start to notice that depth wise, Nuggets are just simply a better team. So that's why I think that in order for the Lakers to win, it has to just be a short series. Because once you start getting into game six, game seven, the Nuggets just have too many players that could show up for 1 or 2 games. I mean, Paul Millsap like proved that he could go out there and drop 30 if he needs to. Like the Nuggets are pretty deep, and I feel like the Lakers are lacking in that area a little bit, where they don't have that go-to on a night when LeBron or AD might be, uh, having a down night.
Yeah, definitely. The Nuggets for sure have the deeper team. When you have someone like Monte Morris coming off the bench, who, if you don't know a lot about basketball, you might not recognize that name. But Jeff Van Gundy touched on it during the game, and I agree with him. Like Morris is very efficient with the ball. He has a high basketball IQ, and like he gets you 11 points, 4 assists a game. But like you really need players like that. Like you need those consistent bench players, and those are generally the people that push your team over the edge of over the course of 4 quarters.
Hmm. Yep. So it sounds like he might still be up in the air. But since this series hasn't started yet, what's your prediction? Lakers, Nuggets. Who you got?
Lakers in 6.
Lakers in six. I got Lakers in five. All right, so we both got Lakers. Let's go Lakers. Can't believe two diehard Kings fans are betting on Lakers making it to the finals after everything we've seen. But I just playoff LeBron, I think still has yet to hit his peak for 2020 playoffs. So we'll see what he brings. But that is going to do it for the reserves recap. And now on to one of our newer segments, Hot Damn and Not Damn Stats of the Week. So, Colin, why don't you go ahead and let us know the hot damn stat of the week?
If you guys watch that Clippers game, you know exactly who this is going to be. It's Jamal Murray. Absolutely crazy. 40 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Over these playoffs, he's been averaging 50% shooting from the field, 50% from three, and 90% from the line. Like that man is going absolutely crazy. He's proving he's worth the contract. He's proving that he's a fringe all NBA player and that we need to really watch him going into next year. But against like I covered it in a couple episodes. This Clippers team has those wing defenders, and it just didn't matter. There was a shot over Kawhi Leonard at the end of the fourth where it was a step back, like on the right side of the elbow three with time expiring, and it went in. And we've learned that like that's not a luck shot from Murray over these playoffs. Like he's hit it time and time again. Like he's here, man, and hot damn.
Hot damn is right. Like I just like that he's kind of like in the eyes of like Nuggets doubters, he's like just kind of come out of nowhere, like to show with the consistency. Like we all knew Jamal Murray had this in him, but it was always like for one big game, or maybe two big games in a row. But like after that Jazz series, I feel like everybody was counting on him to fall off, because he had so many big games in that Jazz series. But no, he's just kept it going. Like it's fantastic to see, and he will be honestly the biggest difference maker in the Lakers Nuggets series, because I honestly just don't think that anybody on the Lakers, in terms of their guards, can guard Jamal Murray. Like I don't see any of these guards on the Lakers slowing him
I'm
down.
guessing it's going to be Caruso, which Caruso can be an efficient defender, and that's why he's called the plus minus god. Like it doesn't show up on the stat sheet of necessarily him getting a lot of steals, but he's very good at denying people the ball. He's very shifty and quick on his feet, so I'm guessing that's a matchup we're going to see, and I'm interested to see how Murray can perform against him.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Moving on from the hot damn, congrats to Jamal Murray. Now we're moving on to the not damn. And if you watch basketball over the last week, this should come as absolutely no surprise. In game seven of the Clippers Nuggets game, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George combined for 24 points, 8 assists, and 10 rebounds. Now, even if one of them total had this as their stat line, I would honestly still kind of see this as a little disappointing in a game seven loss. So the
Yeah, I
fact
was
that
I was going to say that.
the fact that your two best players combined are still a little bit disappointing for a single player stat line in game seven loss. This is what leads me to believe that we could see some big changes in the Clippers this offseason, because I honestly, and I curious your opinion. Looking back, I don't think that there were more than 2 or 3 games in the entire season, including the bubble and including the playoffs, where Kawhi and Paul George both went off and like worked cohesively together. I can't think of more games that I can count on one hand where that happened.
Yeah, I mean, especially in these bubble playoffs, it more often than not it was Kawhi dropping the 38 and 8 stat line, and Paul George dropping the 14, 6 and 4 on somehow 38 minutes played. Like it's been, I don't know, it's just not what people thought it was going to be. And you touched on it, like that stat line right there is like along the lines of what Kawhi Leonard was averaging along these playoffs. Like I think it was like 28, 10, and 5. And the fact that combined in an elimination game 7 game, these two players can't even hit the single averages of what Kawhi was averaging over the playoffs. And I think combined as well, they only had 4 trips to the free throw line. Like you just can't do that. They at that point, like you didn't want to win that game.
Yeah. No, and I mean it for a stat line like that, it really does come down to like a little bit of effort, like when you're that skilled, and I mean, especially for Kawhi, like when you can impact the game as much as Kawhi Leonard can, and that's what you produce in a game 7, like it really calls to question, so much about your game, and I mean, was it just chance, that this, defensive superstar landed on a team that was primed to go to the finals anyways in the Spurs? And then was it just kind of chance that this defensive superstar was like reemerging after an injury plagued couple of seasons and landed on a team that, look at them this year, potentially probably could have made it to the finals even without him? So like, is Kawhi kind of exposing himself as maybe not the superstar everybody thought he was?
Yeah, I saw a tweet like that. I'm not sure that's what you're referencing, but it's like when he was on the Spurs, it was Manu, Popovich, Duncan, Parker, and then role players like Bellinelli. And when he was on that Raptors team, yes, they were a loaded squad, but you were facing the Warriors team without Kevin Durant and without Klay Thompson in that game 6. Like I don't know if, once again, I hate to bring it up, but it's a narrative, man. Like LeBron James doesn't get any slack in these situations, and
Nope.
Kawhi Leonard better hear about this game for the rest of his career. Like this has to be on his resume. This has to be going forward.
Yeah, no, and this is the thing with anyone. Okay, if you're going to talk about their peaks, you have to talk about their valleys. And I don't know, man. Like Kawhi's negatives are starting to stack up against his positives. And like I've made the case for Paul George already. Like he has not been playoff P. He has not been at an MVP level consistently, in my opinion, like since the Pacers. Like he did have a really good year on the Thunder. And I think that
Disappeared in the
he
playoffs.
exactly. I think that he did even end up like third in MVP voting that year, but then he disappeared immediately in the playoffs.
I
So
think that
like
was the year they got eliminated by the rookie-led Utah Jazz.
yes, yes, it was.
Like you can't you can't you can't be this, Gatorade commercial, like all NBA guy, superstar, have all this talk and repertoire about you, and then just show off. Like someone said on Twitter, you went from playoff P to way off P. Like 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and you're shooting a three, and you hit the side of the backboard. Like, come on,
Yeah, yeah, no,
come on.
no, I absolutely agree. It baffles me honestly that both of these players like just didn't show up like that. I was anticipating Paul George not showing up because of what he's shown us, but like for me, the real reason why this ended up on the not damn was like the Kawhi thing. Like I really just did not completely see this coming. Like I said, like 24, 8, and 10 would have been the stat line that I expected from a disappointing game from Kawhi in a game 7 alone. So they're well deserved of this not damn stat of the week. That's for damn sure.
Yep. And that was our hot damn and not damn. So moving on to our hot takes.
Ow, my hand, that's hot. This one's hot too. Okay, we're trapped, everyone for himself.
So our hot take this week is Jokic will outplay Anthony Davis in the Western Conference Finals. I'll let you take the lead on this one.
Uh, you know, there's absolutely no reason why I do not believe that Jokic will outplay Anthony Davis. as far as a one-on-one battle. Um, to be fair to Anthony, or to be fair in this situation, Anthony Davis has not proven to us that he is out from underneath that dark storm cloud of kind of not showing up for playoff games. And it
We're just not
traveled,
making it.
or just simply not making it. Exactly, it traveled with him from the Pelicans, and it's kind of still here. Like I have yet to see a game, where the Lakers really need to rely on AD to show up, and he does. I feel like a lot of the games, the Lakers lost in the bubble, and the Lakers, the two games the Lakers have lost in the playoffs so far. Um, it's like because AD just kind of didn't show up, and he's there defensively on a regular basis, but you really just need like a big like 40-point game from AD in this series to prove to me that he's going to outplay Jokic. Because Jokic will put up, honestly, the hot take was almost what I think Jokic is going to average, and I think Jokic is going to have an absolutely ridiculous series. Like I really do think he's going to go on to a different level because that's what he knows that his team is going to need.
Yeah, I'm super interested to see who will be guarding Jokic, because Frank Vogel alluded to the Lakers kind of returning more to that normal traditional starting five role with maybe JaVale McGee starting, but I don't know. Like Jokic is so crafty that it's like you can't have someone like JaVale McGee on him. Like he'll just burn him every single time. But then at the same time, he's so big and strong. It's like if he catches a ball down the post, like I don't think AD can hold his own. So I think this series is lined for Jokic to have some big play. I'm wondering if maybe LeBron sees some possessions on him. But yeah, I think the hot take was more geared towards not necessarily their one-on-one play, but just series play. Like I'm still waiting to see that Anthony Davis series where,
Mm,
averaging 34 points, 12 rebounds, a couple blocks a game. Like it's always like a couple sprinkled in there, like a 30 and 10 game, but then he'll have like more of a quiet, like 18 and 8 game. Like I'm waiting for that Anthony Davis series.
yeah.
And I think everyone kind of is at this point.
I bet you LeBron is. I bet you LeBron goes back to the hotel room sore and tired as hell, wondering when his co-partner is going to show up for to take over a game.
Yeah, if I'm Anthony Davis in this series, like especially with what's happened in the rest of the playoffs in the bubble, like I have to prove myself. Like going into the fourth quarter, I can't disappear. Like I have to get the touches
Yep.
and like I have to lead this team to victory.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. But that is just gonna about do it for our hot takes. Not gonna dive too much into this one, but we can't go a Friday podcast episode without handing out our weekly reserves not star. So there's all stars and there's not stars. Colin, why don't you give them our weekly reserves not star?
Yeah, I mean this one doesn't need build up. We don't need to elaborate on it. Like Twitter already killed them for about 2 days straight now. Our not star has to be the Los Angeles Clippers. Like I said, no need to say anything about it. Like it is what it is. They didn't show up. They're going home. They're not here. They're the not star.
Yeah, no, and like you said, we talked about him quite a bit, but you know, honestly, this is a worse disappointment than the Bucks because the
Yes.
Bucks did not go out of their way to destroy their future in order to get Giannis onto the team for a chance at a championship. Like the Clippers purposely disregarded their future, did it whatever they could to get Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in hopes of getting a championship. Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't championship or bust this year. Okay, I will accept that. I'll accept those comments by the Clippers players that they don't believe that this year was championship or bust. But I mean, this is not. When you lose to the Nuggets, and the Nuggets are only going to get better because they're so young, it doesn't spell great success in the future either. Because your team is only getting older, and these young teams that are in the West are only going to get better. So, well deserving of our weekly reserves not star, the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yeah.
As
And
Skip Bayless put it, moving back into the basement of the Staples Center.
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and close this podcast out with one last thing. So I'm gonna read to you Paul George's stat line over these postseasons. So 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 38% from the field, 32% from three. Now, the second thing I'm gonna read to you is the trade that brought him to the Clippers. So the trade was the Thunder exchange Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, Clippers first-round picks in 2022, 2024, and 2026, along with 2 first-round choices via Miami 2021 and 2023, and OKC obtained the rights to swap first-round picks in 2023 and 2025. That is what it took to get Pandemic P onto the Clippers. There goes your future.
Yep. And with that, that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Reserves Podcast. Not to end on such a sour note, but adios, Clippers. We are moving on to hopefully bigger and better battles for the rest of the playoffs. We have Lakers, Nuggets, Heat, Celtics. You know that we're going to cover everything that happens over the next few days on next week's podcast. Colin, last thing for him before we sign off. You got anything?
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you guys next week.